Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. In this video of the Python tutorial video series, we are going to be kicking off by learning about variables in Python and how to use them and what they are. Let's jump into it. So in this first video, we're going to need to learn about variables in Python. They're kind of like the basics of how to do anything in Python in order to have a variable to do things. A variable is essentially a piece of information that you can pass around and use in your program to store things like, name, age, address, things like this. And we're going to go through and do that now. So let's jump over to PyCharm. Okay, so in PyCharm, if you come click right here and on your tutorial series, go new Python file and call this variables, variable, whatever you want to do, new Python car. This should pop a variables Python into your project like so. I've just done a few here so I can batch record some videos in a go, but we're going to first talk about variables and what they are. So essentially a variable is any piece of information that you can store in Python, but there is a very specific way that you must store variables. So for example, in order to declare a variable, like for example my age or something, or maybe let's start again. So in a programming language you need to determine different types of things. So you have, for example, integers, you have floats, you have strings, and you have lists of things, or all different types of information. So an integer would be an age, for example. A float would be maybe like, I don't know, what's a float? A pi 3.14, that's got a little decimal place in it, so that becomes a float. That means, it's not an integer because it's not a whole number, it's, got a decimal there. Or strings, your name is a string, your name isn't an integer, is it? It's not, Haydn is some letters of characters, it's not some letters of numbers or some characters of numbers. So in Python we use variables essentially to store this information. And in Python the way you declare a variable is you basically say the name of the variable that you want to call it, you put an equal sign, and then you say the value of the variable here. So I've actually just declared here a string variable. So it's a string because it is all characters basically. So I've started here and opened the string, and then I've written what I've wanted to say in my string, and then I've closed it, and then that is now stored in the name of variables. So now if I print out this name of variable and come down to my run the current file, you see I've printed out name of variable here. Now this is printed out value of variable because the value is on the right hand side and the name is on the left hand side. Now this is a bit of a kind of a wacky example, but you'd have an variable, for example, like my age, and let's say I'm 18 years old here. I've now declared a variable of type integer because this is a number. Notice how I haven't got the little ticks on the start here to declare that this is a number. So there's a very big difference between this variable, which is a string, which is essentially just a collection of characters, whereas this is a number, and Python will treat these differently. So for example, you can times two numbers together, but you can't times two strings together, because how would you times value of variable times, I don't know, Haydn, for example, but we'll get into that later. A few things you want to be careful of when doing variables is variables must start with characters. So for example, name of variable and my age are characters. You can't, for example, start a variable name with 1, 2, 3, ABC, because you'll see that Python here doesn't like that. It will say something, or at least PyCharm is telling you here that it says, this is an invalid variable name. And similarly, you can't start a variable with that's a bad example. You can't start a variable with, for example, with special characters being kind of these not alphanumeric essentially characters, because Python will also complain about that. So in order to declare a variable, you must have the name of the variable on your left and then the value of the variable on the right. So let's talk about ints or integers, for example. So here we have my age as an integer of 18. Let's say you could have number of dogs I've got. Let's say I've got 2 dogs. Oh, I'm going to take my age off there. So my age is 18 and I've got 2 dogs, let's say. So integers are very much as they are. They're whole numbers of things that you need to store, and you store them in a type called an integer, which is essentially just a whole number in mathematics. I wouldn't get too hung up about this stuff now. Once you start using them, they'll become a lot more understood. You've also got types in another variable in or data type. These are all kind of data types, integers, strings. You've got another one in Python called a float. So my float. These are numbers that are essentially decimal places. So for example, pi is 3.14.16, blah, 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 whatever the value of pi is. You can see here that anything essentially with a dot is a float. So if you want to store a float, you would just put this dot here, and Python knows what to do. Notice how I'm literally just calling, like there's no distinguishing feature between the names on the left hand side, what you're calling them, and what's on the right. So for example, you know, I could actually put 3.14 in my age, and Python would be fine with that because it's just storing this value against this name. So it doesn't have to be a specific thing. I'm just storing it against this name. So you're not saying like this is a integer called my name and it's this. You're just saying my name. Whenever I use the code my name, I want you to my age, I want you to use 3.14. So there's these are different data types we've got here. So we've got floats. Another one we've got is strings. This is probably a very common one. So for example, my string is hello, my name is Haydn. So here I've got the string called my name is Haydn, and I could make another one. Let's say my name actually is Haydn here, and then I can pass this variable around in my program and give it to different areas, and they wouldn't need to know the actual underlying value here. They can just use the name. So for example, if you want to get clever here, I'll show you, you can start typing some cool things out. So if I say hello, my name is, and then I do this and I do a comma and then I put in name, it should print out hello, my name is Haydn to the command line, and you can see that it's printed out hello, my name is Haydn here. And let's say I want to do something for more, so I can say and my age is, and then I've got a variable called my age which is up here. I'm going to print that out and we're going to run. And you can see here we're now this print statement here, which is just printing stuff to essentially the command line, doesn't need to know actually what the value of name is. It just knows that there's a name there. So I can put it into this string and go hello, my name is name, my age is my age, and for example it says, you know, hello, my name is Haydn, my age is 18. I could change this to, you know, hello, my name is Andrew and my age is, let's say, 21, and run that again. And you can see how this has changed now. So that's what a variable is. Essentially it's a thing that can change, and you can use the value of the variable and you can pass that around. So for example, name and age. So let's move on to some more. So we have booleans in Python, which basically have two values. They're either true or false. So a value is true or false. So here I'm going to say my boolean is true, but you could have one that says like is student. So am I a student? I'm not a student anymore. Booleans are just true false values. So you can see how we're storing different things against different things. We're just calling them different things, but you know, we have these different data types on the side. Finally, we have a none type in Python, which is basically when you don't know what it could be, you would put none there. So if you don't know if it's going to be an integer or a float or a string or a boolean, you would just use the none type in Python, and that's dictated here. So again, this is just kind of a crash course on how to do variables in Python. That kind of gives you an overview of all the kind of different data types. Well, not all the different data types, but all the data types you need to know for now, because our first project, we're going to be building something using kind of these data types. So in the event that you don't know what a data type is, you can actually print the variable types in Python. So if you use this function called print with little circle braces, and then you say the type of the variable that you want to use. So for example, I say do I have a my int or my age? My age was an integer, wasn't it? It was 18 or something. And then we've also got print my none. So if I run it, you'll see that it prints the thing again. And then we've got this. So we have like this class type. We'll get onto classes later in the course, but basically you can, like right now, without seeing the code above, you don't know what my age is. You assume it would be an integer from the name of it, but you don't necessarily know. These ones are a little bit more explicit because they are, but there is actually technically no like forcing of anything here. I could be really malicious in my code and change my float to a string, and then people go, oh, but it's called my float, and it's just like, well, that's the name of the variable. That doesn't necessarily determine what the variable is holding. So you can use this print type or this type method to actually get back the type here. So you can see the first one, we've got an integer, which is my age. The second is a float, which is the 3.14. My string is, you know, my name is blah, blah, blah. That's a string. The Boolean value is, in Python, it's called a bool. And then the none type here is a type of none type here. So that's how you can be 100% sure what type you're using. Next, I want to move on to redeclaring variables. So let's say I've got a variable called my age, which is 18, and then I print the value of my age here, I'm going to turn off all these other prints. By turning them off, I'm going to comment them out. It just puts this little hash in front of them, and then Python knows to ignore them. And I'm also going to do the same to this one here. So if I run this now, you can see we print the value of 18 down into the console here. So, but that's fine, because let's say later down in the program we want to, override the value. So actually I've changed from 18 to 21 now, and I want to print this age. You can do that by simply just calling the same name and setting it to a new value. So you're saying here you're saying my age is equal to 18, and then here you're saying now I'm redeclaring my age to be equal to 21. So if I run this now, you can see we get 18 printed out and 21. So you can do this all over the place. Finally, I would like to move on to operators. This is kind of, again, a crash course for kind of all your basic things you need to know. So your operators are things like plus, minus, times, and divide in Python. So your kind of mathematical operators. So we can say, for example, x is equal to 1, y is equal to 5. And then I can say print out, the sum is, and this will be a good little example, or kind of like a homework if you want to pause the video here. How would you calculate the sum of these two variables? So what you need to do is do x plus y. In mathematics, obviously x plus y, or this variable plus this variable, is going to give you the sum of that. So if I run this here, you can see I've got my 18 here, but the sum is 6. So 1 plus 5 is 6. So let's go through all of these now. So let's do the sum. Okay, so now let's go through and actually do these for each different type. So we've got the summation, the subtraction, the multiplication, and the division. So in order to do this, we're going to use different operators. So we've got the subtraction, we're going to do x minus y. That will give us a subtraction of these two. Multiplication, we're going to do x times y. That will give the multiplication of these two. And then if we do y, actually no, we can do x over y, and that will give us the division of these. And if I run this now, you can see that we get the sum of 5 plus 1 is 5. The subtraction of, what we've got, 1 minus 5 is minus 4. The multiplication is 5 times 1, 1. And the division is 0.2. So you can see we're using mathematical operators here on our variables to go through. So that's the end of the video. Hopefully that made sense about Python variables. So you have a variable, you declare it on the left, you put an equal sign, and then you put your value on the right. There is no, you don't have to tell Python what the type is. Python will work that out for itself. So if you put an integer there, it will know it's an integer. If you put a float there, it will know it's. You can redeclare variables. So if you have my age of 18 and then later and you go my age is now 21, you can redeclare variables, and you can times variables together. So if you have two integers, you can do, times, add, division, subtraction. So hopefully this is a good kind of crash course from what a variable is in Python. Essentially, it's just a way of storing data. Think of it as just some sort of bucket of data that you can put something in. So you have a variable name and you put some information into it, and that is the thing that you can pass around and use in your program. It'd be really good to get a good understanding of this. We're going to build on this later down in the tutorial series, so this is a really, you should really cement your knowledge in these things. But like anything, it comes in time. So the more you practice, the more you do, the better you'll become. So thank you very much for watching this video. Please like, subscribe, and follow along for more tutorials in this series. Have a great day, everybody.